My name is Adrian Mercer, 38 years old. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Morrison Industries had glass walls that made you feel like you were suspended above downtown Seattle. On clear days, you could see all the way to Mount Rainier, soft and distant, like something out of a postcard. Today, the mountain was swallowed by thick storm clouds rolling in over the sound, turning the water a hard, metallic gray. Thunder in the distance, lightning somewhere behind the skyline. Fitting, considering what was about to happen in this room. I sat in the back corner, my chair nudged just far enough from the long mahogany table that it looked like an afterthought. No place card in front of me, no presentation binder, no laptop open. Just me, my phone, and a legal pad I didn't really need. Nobody questioned why I was there. Nobody ever questioned me anymore. They'd gotten used to the quiet son lurking at the edge of the room, the one who liked the technical stuff and didn't interfere with real decisions. At the head of the table stood my sister, Vanessa. She wore a tailored red power suit that probably cost more than my car, with a narrow black belt cinching her waist and heels that clicked sharply whenever she shifted her weight. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek twist that said she didn't intend to be argued with. Behind her, our mother sat with a lace handkerchief balled in her fist, dabbing at her eyes in little controlled motions. Uncle Thomas, Dad's brother and the VP of Operations, watched Vanessa with that satisfied, paternal pride he reserved for people he considered doers. Aunt Caroline sat beside him, her expression politely neutral, the way it always was when she didn't want to pick a side too early. My older brother Marcus slouched 3 chairs down, one arm draped over the back of his seat, leg bouncing, wearing a smug little half-smile as if he were already rehearsing his victory drink speech in his head. The entire family had gathered for this. Vanessa's moment. As you all know, she began, her tone crisp and polished, the kind of voice you get after years of case studies and presentations at Harvard Business School. Our father's health has created a leadership vacuum at Morrison Industries. A stillness settled over the table at the mention of Dad. 6 months ago, he'd had a stroke in his office. One minute, he was standing over a set of quarterly reports, arguing with Robert about long-term capital expenditures. The next, he was on the floor, his right side slack, his speech scrambled. Since then, the company had pretended to be in interim mode, but everyone knew this day was coming. Morrison Industries, Vanessa continued, needs strong, decisive leadership to navigate the challenges ahead. The markets are volatile. Our competitors are circling. We cannot afford to drift. She clicked her remote. The screen behind her flickered to life with a sleek title slide, Morrison Industries, Strategic Restructuring and Future Leadership. I knew the deck, not because she'd shared it with me, but because I'd seen versions of it cross my desk in the last few months. Not the whole thing, just certain data polls, performance reports, departmental breakdowns she'd requested through back channels. You could always tell when someone was building a case. The numbers they asked for were a confession. I've spent the last 6 months developing a comprehensive restructuring plan, she said. Under my leadership, Morrison Industries will streamline operations, divest underperforming divisions, and refocus on our core competencies. We will emerge leaner, stronger, and more profitable than ever. Heads nodded around the table. Uncle Thomas gave a short, approving grunt. Our mother sniffled, like someone had just announced a wedding instead of a corporate execution. Marcus, never subtle, started a slow clap that died an awkward death when no one joined him. Vanessa didn't flinch. I'm proposing that the board vote today to install me as CEO effective immediately, she said smoothly. I've already secured proxy votes from Mother, Marcus, Uncle Thomas, and Aunt Caroline. That represents 42% of the family shares. Combined with institutional investors who have indicated support for new leadership, we have more than enough to approve this transition and implement my restructuring plan within the next 90 days. At the far end of the table, Robert Chin, our CFO of 20 years, cleared his throat quietly. Vanessa kept talking. Robert's eyes flicked towards me for half a second before returning to his notes. If anyone in this room knew how fragile Vanessa's certainty really was, it was him. On the screen, the next slide appeared, a bulleted list of key restructuring initiatives. I'd read those words before. I'd run numbers on them. I knew exactly how many people each bullet point would throw out of work. First, Vanessa said, we'll sell the manufacturing division in Ohio. The one Dad built from the ground up, I said. my voice cutting through hers before I could stop myself. The room went silent. Every head turned toward me, as if they'd forgotten I existed until that moment. I rarely spoke in these meetings. That was by design. Let people underestimate you long enough, and they'll eventually stop watching you at all. The Ohio plant is hemorrhaging money, Vanessa replied, irritation tightening her jaw. We've reviewed the numbers extensively. Sentiment doesn't pay dividends, Adrian. Dad would understand that. I studied her for a beat. Would he? Yes, she snapped. He was a businessman first. He'd want us to make smart, rational decisions, not emotional ones. Smart decisions, I repeated softly. Is that what you're calling this? Marcus leaned forward, sensing an opportunity to perform. What's your problem, Aid? You've never cared about the business side. You're happy in your little lab, playing with prototypes. Let the adults handle strategy. I smiled faintly. I'm 38, Marcus. A-Day outgrew the kids' table a while ago. You know what he means, Vanessa cut in. You've never positioned yourself for leadership. You've never shown interest in running the company. So why start now? I looked at her, at my mother's confused frown, at Uncle Thomas, already annoyed that his tidy succession picture was getting messy. I'm not starting now, I said. I'm finishing what I started 15 months ago. A small muscle twitched at the corner of Robert's mouth. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was something. He knew what was coming. He'd help me prepare for it. What are you talking about? My mother asked, a fragile tremor in her voice. Adrian, Robert said quietly, perhaps now would be an appropriate time to share the documentation we discussed. I nodded and reached for my phone. Lightning flashed outside, reflecting in the glass, casting everyone in a brief, white glare. On the screen behind Vanessa, her carefully arranged slide deck vanished, replaced by a scanned document with dense blocks of legal text and a date in the upper right-hand corner. This, I said, my voice steady, is a stock transfer agreement, dated March 15th of last year. It transfers 90% of Morrison Industries shares from our father to me. The transfer was completed, filed, and recorded 6 weeks before his stroke. For half a heartbeat, the room didn't react. It was like everyone's brains hit the same glitch at the same time. Then everything detonated at once. That's impossible, Vanessa said, the certainty draining from her face. No, this is some kind of mistake. It's public record, Robert said, his tone calm but firm. Filed with the SEC, registered with the state, reviewed by external counsel, completely legal and binding. As of 15 months ago, Adrian Mercer is the majority shareholder of Morrison Industries. Dad would never, Marcus started. Dad did, I said, cutting him off. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt, but my voice stayed level. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. I'd hoped I'd never actually have to live it. We spent 18 months discussing it, working through the details, planning the transition. He wanted to make sure the company stayed in the family, stayed true to its mission, and stayed under leadership that understood what he'd built. My mother stared at me like she was trying to reconcile the son she thought she knew with the one standing in front of her. Why didn't you tell us? She whispered. Because Dad asked me not to. Because he wanted to see what you would do. Because I wanted to see it too. Out loud, I said only, he asked me to wait. Across the table, Vanessa's hands gripped the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles whitened. For years, she'd walked into rooms like this knowing they were hers. Now, for the first time, the room wasn't orbiting around her. For the first time, every pair of eyes was on me. And for the first time in my life, my family finally saw me clearly, and none of them liked what they saw. Chaos erupted the moment the words left my mouth. Chairs scraped, voices collided, papers rustled like startled birds. It was the first time I had ever seen my family truly bewildered, stripped of performance, polish, and their carefully curated illusions of control. That can't be right, Vanessa's voice cracked, the first fracture in her perfectly constructed facade. This must be a draft, a preliminary document, something Dad never signed. It's final, Robert said, calm, unshaken, almost clinical. Executed, notarized, witnessed, and filed. There is no ambiguity. My mother pressed a trembling hand to her chest. Adrian, why? Why would he choose you? Marcus laughed, sharp, bitter, disbelieving. Of course, the quiet one, the shadow lurking in the corner. You must have talked him into it, manipulated him when he was vulnerable. He wasn't vulnerable, I said, forcing myself to meet Marcus's stare. The agreement was signed a full year before his stroke. His doctors had cleared him. His lawyers triple-checked the paperwork. He knew exactly what he was doing. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. No, Dad would have told us. He wouldn't just hand the entire company to someone who never even wanted it. I felt something twist in my chest, not triumph, not anger, something heavier, a sadness I didn't have a name for. You never asked, I said quietly. Vanessa froze. Excuse me? You never asked where the company was heading, or who Dad trusted, or what he wanted. You just assumed it would be you. Because I earned it, she snapped. I've spent my entire career preparing to take over this company. And I spent the last 15 years running it from the inside, I replied. You saw the title. You never saw the work. Her eyes flickered. Hurt. Disbelief. The beginning of panic. She clicked to the previous slide, as if the computer might reject the reality now displayed. It didn't. The legal transfer remained. Even if this is real, Uncle Thomas said, his voice rough, you don't have the experience, the degree, the executive background. I do, I said. I completed my MBA 3 years ago, finished summa cum laude. Marcus snorted. Since when? Since every night, I said. Studying in hotel rooms, airport lounges, and plant offices while you were busy investing your trust fund in whatever coin of the week was trending. He stiffened. Screw you, Adrian. Not now, Marcus, Aunt Caroline whispered, her eyes darting nervously around the table. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice low and trembling. You secretly got an MBA? You hid that from us? I didn't hide it, I said. I just didn't announce it. There's a difference. Robert added, your father oversaw his progress personally. My mother's breath caught. He did? For the first time since the meeting began, the room felt cold. I took a slow breath. Dad wanted someone who understood every part of this company. Not just the boardroom, not just the strategy, the real work, the people. That's a sentimental answer, Vanessa said. But there was fear in her voice now, not disdain. Sentiment doesn't fix a failing plant. Which is why I didn't rely on sentiment, I said, tapping my phone. A new presentation appeared, numbers, charts, projections. The Ohio plant, I continued, stopped losing money 7 months ago. It's been profitable for an entire quarter. Vanessa blinked. What? I implemented automation upgrades, I said, renegotiated supplier contracts, brought in a new plant manager, someone who knows manufacturing instead of cost-cutting. The board members leaned in. They recognized those numbers. They'd been seeing them for months. And the divisions you wanted to divest, I added, 3 are already restructured. The other 2 are on track to be profitable within a year. That's impossible, Marcus muttered. You did that? While hiding everything from us? You were all busy, I said. Vanessa climbing the corporate ladder, you building your portfolio, Uncle Thomas planning his retirement, Mom focusing on Dad's rehab. Nobody was paying attention to what was happening inside the company. One of the independent directors cleared his throat. Adrian has been presenting strategic initiatives for months. They've been approved unanimously at each vote. Vanessa's mouth fell open. You knew? We assumed the family was aware of the ownership structure, another director said gently. We were told everything was transparent. My sister's face flushed. Betrayal. Humiliation. The crushing realization that the board she thought was in her corner had been partnering with me the entire time. You all let me stand up here, she whispered, and present a plan to a company I don't even own. My voice softened. I wanted to hear your plan. I wanted to know what you'd do if you were in charge. And now you know, she shot back. I'd actually run this company, grow it, strengthen it. I exhaled slowly. You'd tear apart everything Dad built to make the numbers look good for 1 quarter. That's unfair, she snapped. Is it? Your plan cuts 800 jobs. Hard decisions are part of leadership. And protecting people is also leadership, I said. Dad understood that. My mother looked between us, her eyes shining with tears. Not from theatrics this time, but something deeper. Shame, grief, confusion. She whispered, why didn't your father give the shares to all of you equally? Why would he do this? I met her gaze. He tried. Silence dropped over the room like a curtain. He proposed an equal split 10 years ago, I said, but Vanessa didn't want to share control. Marcus planned to sell his shares for cash. Dad realized equal ownership would tear this company apart. Vanessa's expression fractured. That's not true. It is, Uncle Thomas said reluctantly. He told me the same thing. He said splitting the company equally would create chaos. My mother looked heartbroken. So he chose one of you. No one breathed. I swallowed hard. No, he chose the company. And in that moment, something shifted. Not the power, That had already changed hands. Something older, something more fragile. The foundation of what we thought family meant. It cracked down the middle, quiet, irreversible, and none of us could unhear the truth. The silence that followed my words wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. It pressed against the walls, thick and heavy, as if the entire building was holding its breath. My mother slowly lowered herself into her chair, the lace of her handkerchief crushed in her trembling fist. "He chose you," she whispered. "Your father chose you." I shook my head. "He chose stability. He chose the company. He chose what he believed would survive." Marcus scoffed. "That's your version of the story. Convenient. Makes you look noble while making the rest of us look like idiots." "I didn't make you look like anything," I said quietly. "You did that yourselves." Marcus stood so abruptly his chair skidded back. "You manipulated him. I know you did. You spent years alone with Dad in those damn plants, whispering ideas, getting in his head, turning him against us." His voice rose, cracking at the edges, not with anger, but something more desperate. The fear of being left behind. The fear he'd never admit. I didn't raise my voice. He wasn't vulnerable when he signed the papers. He wasn't confused. He wasn't pressured. The transfer happened long before his stroke. He had every advisor, every lawyer, every specialist involved. This wasn't a whim. "A choice to betray his family," Marcus shot back. "A choice to protect the company," I corrected. "And if you can't tell the difference, that's exactly why you weren't chosen." Marcus froze, the words landing harder than expected. In his silence, the truth lay bare. He had never been interested in responsibility, only entitlement. Uncle Thomas cleared his throat, breaking the tension. His voice was low, rough, unexpectedly fragile. "Your father talked to me about this," he said. "About a year before the transfer. He asked me what I thought of his succession plan." Everyone turned to stare at him. "I told him to split it equally," he continued. "I told him it would keep the peace, avoid conflict." "And?" Vanessa asked, her voice barely audible. Uncle Thomas's face creased with memory. "He told me, Thomas, I didn't build this company to keep the peace. I built it to last." He said only one of his children understood that. Vanessa closed her eyes slowly, as if bracing for impact. He meant Adrian. A tremor passed through my mother's shoulders. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not dramatic this time, but raw, exhausted grief. The grief of a woman realizing the unity she pretended existed had been an illusion for years. Aunt Caroline reached for her hand, but my mother didn't move. Vanessa exhaled shakily. "So, all these years, Dad was grooming you?" "No," I said. "He was preparing me. There's a difference." "You hid it," she whispered. "You hid everything. You let us think we had a say." "You did have a say," I replied. "You still do. You hold 10% of the shares between you. You could have come to meetings, read the reports, participated in strategy sessions, but none of you did." "That's because we thought," Vanessa stopped, the rest of her sentence collapsing under its own weight, "that it would all be handed to you," I finished. Her jaw tightened. "I could have run this company. I would have." "You still can," I said, "in a role that fits your strengths, a strategic advisor, someone who challenges ideas, drives efficiency, pushes innovation." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "As long as I don't have any actual power, as long as everyone understands who really runs things." "That's not what I said," I replied. "That's exactly what you said," she shot back, voice trembling with a mixture of fury and pain. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the polished executive in the red suit, but my older sister, who used to braid my hair when we were kids, who used to read me bedtime stories when Mom was working late, who taught me how to play chess and let me win exactly once so I would stay motivated. I said gently, "Vanessa, I'm not your enemy." She stared at me, eyes shining. "You could have told me, any time before today. You could have warned me." "Would you have listened?" I asked. The silence was her answer. She looked away, jaw clenched, swallowing hard. Marcus spoke again, bitterness twisting every syllable. "Let me guess. All this work you're bragging about, the plant turnaround, the restructuring, the acquisitions, you think that makes you better than us?" "No," I said. It made me ready. "Bullshit," he spat. "Marcus," I said, "I spent 15 years learning every part of this business. Operations, finance, HR, supply chain, R&D. I worked 60-hour weeks while you were in Bali taking Instagram photos. I walked factory floors while you were investing in meme coins. I earned this. I didn't just inherit it." Marcus's cheeks reddened, fury rising. "You're not better. You're just sneakier." "I'm more patient," I replied. "That's the difference." Robert cleared his throat from the corner. For the record, the board has been working with Adrian on all strategic initiatives. Everything he's done has followed proper governance. The board? Vanessa asked, eyes wide. You all knew? We knew new leadership direction existed, one director said carefully. We were told the family was informed. Vanessa laughed softly, a hollow sound. Of course you were. My mother wiped her cheeks. So what now? Are you going to fire us? Cut us out completely? Fire you from what? I asked gently. None of you work here, except Uncle Thomas, and he's planning to retire. The room deflated slightly. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, like a fish desperate for air. Then he asked the one question he shouldn't have. What about our shares? We still have leverage. I hesitated for half a breath. The board members noticed. Vanessa didn't. I already made you an offer, I said. Both of you, through intermediaries. A buyout at a 30% premium. Marcus froze. What? You both accepted, I said softly. The transactions closed last month. The room fell utterly still. Vanessa's face went blank. I accepted? You said you wanted liquidity, I said. You said you were diversifying. You sold most of your shares to an anonymous buyer. Anonymous? She realized, her voice cracked. It was you. You each retained 2%, I said. For family reasons. The words landed like a quiet explosion. Marcus sank into a chair. Vanessa clutched the back of hers, as though the floor had tilted beneath her feet. My mother covered her mouth, stunned. Uncle Thomas nodded faintly, as if this last revelation confirmed something he'd suspected all along. I looked around the room, at the shock, the betrayal, the disbelief, and felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Only the heavy, hollow ache of inevitability. Vanessa whispered, I need time. To think about your offer? I asked gently. To think about all of this, she said. To think about whether I can work with you, or for you, or anywhere near you. She gathered her papers with shaking hands. I need time, she repeated, voice breaking, to decide whether I can live with what you did, or with what I've become. She walked toward this door, each step slower than the one before. Marcus followed, not looking back. My mother hesitated, her eyes full of a grief that wasn't aimed at me, but at the pieces of our family scattered across the table. She whispered, Your father's choices. They saved the company, but I'm afraid they may have broken us. She left the room quietly, the sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway. For the first time all morning, no one spoke. Not even me. 6 months passed. 6 months since that storm-dark morning on the 42nd floor. 6 months since Vanessa walked out with tears she didn't let fall. 6 months since Marcus realized leverage wasn't the same thing as responsibility. 6 months since I became the visible, undeniable head of Morrison Industries. And in those 6 months, the company transformed. The Ohio plant, the one Vanessa wanted to sell, was running at 112% capacity now. On my last visit, the break room walls were plastered with handwritten thank you notes from employees' kids who'd gotten new school supplies because their parents received bonuses for the first time in years. Beside them hung a framed picture of my father from 20 years ago, standing in that same break room, laughing with grease on his hands. The manufacturing divisions that had been labeled underperforming were all profitable now, not because we gutted them, but because we fixed what was broken instead of discarding what was inconvenient. One division manager shook my hand so hard during a quarterly visit that my fingers went numb for half an hour. Our revenue was at an all-time high, employee retention up, customer satisfaction through the roof. The board meetings had shifted in tone, fewer attempts to remind me of procedures, more genuine collaboration. People who'd once dismissed me as a quiet technician now listened when I spoke. Success had a strange heat to it. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy, like something I had to carry with both hands. Vanessa, meanwhile, had taken a CEO position at a consulting firm in New York. She sent me a short email when our Q2 numbers were released. She wrote, "Congratulations. The results are impressive. Vivi." No exclamation marks. No warmth, but no venom either. Respectful distance. It was more than I expected. Marcus, on the other hand, had become the tragic punchline of his own ambition. After selling most of his shares to the anonymous buyer, me, and pocketing a fortune, he poured nearly all of it into cryptocurrency. He lost 40% within 8 weeks. He still called occasionally, sometimes to complain about market manipulation, sometimes to ask for a board position or a strategic advisory role. I always said no. It wasn't punishment. It was mercy. Some lessons don't stick until the consequences do. Aunt Caroline sold half of her remaining shares early on and kept the rest with surprising pragmatism. Uncle Thomas held on to his, saying the company had the right captain at last. He retired quietly, no bitterness, just a soft pride I didn't fully understand until he squeezed my shoulder at his farewell dinner and said, "Your father would sleep easier knowing you're steering the ship." As for my mother, she visited Dad at the rehabilitation facility every day. Rain or shine, storm or traffic. Painfully, stubbornly loyal. I joined her 3 times a week, sometimes more. Dad couldn't speak much. His words came like distant echoes traveling through static. Broken, tangled, sometimes arriving hours late. But he tried. That mattered more than anything. Last month, he said his first real word since the stroke: company. The therapist nearly cried. My mother did cry. His second word was good. His third was Adrian. I didn't cry in front of him. I waited until I was in my car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. It wasn't the praise that broke me. It was the relief, the confirmation, the knowledge that all those nights studying, all those days in steel-smelling plants, all those years in the shadows hadn't been a delusion. He remembered. He approved. He still believed in me. The board position I'd created for Vanessa remained open. I kept it empty, not as a bargaining tool, but as a reminder, to myself more than to her, that people can change, that families fracture, but sometimes fractures heal. I didn't expect her to come back, but leaving the door unlocked felt like the least I could do. Late one evening, long after the employees had gone home and the office was lit only by security lights, I sat at my desk staring at a sealed envelope in the top drawer. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, thick pen strokes, slight slant. My name written in the center with the same methodical care he used when signing contracts. He wrote it a month before his stroke. I hadn't opened it. I couldn't, because I knew whatever was inside that envelope would change something else, either by confirming everything he'd entrusted me with, or by revealing something I wasn't prepared to carry. Responsibility is one kind of weight. Revelation is another. I ran my thumb over the paper's edge, feeling the faint texture of the fibers. I thought about the decisions I'd made, the jobs I'd saved, the siblings I'd lost and might one day find again, the legacy I was desperately trying to protect without becoming the kind of leader my sister once feared I would be. Outside my office window, Seattle glowed beneath a soft haze of mist and city light. Workers at the Ohio plant were starting their morning shifts. Engineers in R&D were probably still tinkering with prototypes. Somewhere in a quiet rehab room, my father slept under a thin blanket, unaware that the company he built was thriving again. I closed the drawer slowly. Not tonight. Not yet. There are some truths you face only when you're strong enough to carry them, and I wasn't there. Not today. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, exhaled, and whispered into the quiet room. The best kind of power isn't the kind you grab. It's the kind you earn so thoroughly, no one can take it away. I didn't say the second half out loud, even though it lived gently, painfully in my chest. And sometimes earning that power costs you the very people you wanted to share it with. I turned off the light, locked the office door, and walked into the hallway, carrying both the company and the consequences into whatever came next.